First we have goodies. Yeah. It's for this Sunday between 1 and 3. It is an annual traditional song fest. And the host and hostess sent these along and said, be certain to invite everybody because it's a really wonderful time. All kinds of singing and children and goodies and probably even a puppet play for the kids, though I don't know for sure. There are all sorts of things like that, even if you're 3 to 5. And even if you're not a good singer, there's an excellent piano player so that you can just sing right along, and it's a jolly good time. And this is how to get there because it's in Winona, which is one of those places that you can't get to from here. So. This is the last time we meet until the 23rd of January. The astrology class recommences on the 22nd, and this class recommences on the 23rd. And by spring, we should get out of the Garden of Eden. But I'm not certain because it's going awfully, awfully slowly. But it's been... What? Well, that's... We won't quite make it.
Last night?
I didn't recognize.
Nope. This isn't the Garden of Eden. The east and west coasts are going into the sea. We're going to run astrology classes that run the world right from this place. And they're going to see down like this. This is
That's very well understanding.
Did I unplug the phone? Yes, I believe I did. Well, a little ringing on tape won't hurt anyone. What? All right. This is things now begin to be very difficult. Partly because some of what we're going to talk about is hard and unpleasant to talk about. Not this time yet, but eventually we're going to talk about sin and evil and the ultimate consequences of what has gotten us into this state where we do very unkind things to each other. So we have to some extent, talk about it. And in doing that, we have to face it. And we have to face it very clearly, and we have to face it with integrity. We need to look at evil for what it is without becoming fascinated by it and hence subject to its influence, or without overconfidently minimalizing it and making it to be as though there were nothing there, because there are great problems with each of these outlooks. There are two quite different philosophies about the subject of evil among spiritual aspirants. One philosophy is to be as clear and educated and informed as we can possibly be, so that we can look at it objectively, see it, and not fall prey to it. This philosophy would be very fine if we hadn't already been subject to it for a long time. Many thousands of years, during which time we have allowed it to take root in us. And to a large extent, nastiness has taken hold of our being and insinuated itself right into our soul and right into our evolution. It's a very interesting word because it means to snake in. Insinuation means to snake-like slither your way in. There are some unpleasantnesses about this philosophy, which I can speak to from observation. It would be a very lovely philosophy to have about evil if evil were a subject something like mathematics or physics, that we could look at it very coolly and detachedly. However, we are very feelingful, especially about our own desires and defensive about our own being. And it doesn't work according to the theoretical model. I've seen a number of unpleasant things that have occurred from this. One is that by too much observing of evil, one can become preoccupied with it and fascinated by it, almost like snake-like hypnosis that we talked about last time. It's something that happens even very similar to the way little children are preoccupied with what they made. They look in the potty and they say, "Look at what I made." And a lot of people are fascinated by evil and the power that evil has and how they can be someone or become someone by the applying of evil. And we're not just talking about extreme cases like Faust or Aleister Crowley. We're talking about everyday people that you walk down the street and they like to frown or drive down the street and be badasses and demonstrate their power. It's somehow, there are a lot of people who identify with not being good or not being nice. Another effect of this philosophy applied is that if one is not really strong in spirit, objective exposure to evil results in fear and becoming subject to it. I've met a lot of very seemingly nice people that have tried too much to look objectively at evil and did not have the positivity and the will to do so, and they could name more varieties of the devil and more forms of evil expression than a hellfire church master. It's a difficult thing. There may be misresponses to this philosophy, and we're going to have to do a little of it, but one has to be careful. The other philosophy about evil is to ignore it as much as possible. Not so much for the sake of ignoring it, but instead putting all of the consciousness on God and putting all of the consciousness on doing good. And having faith that when one needs to learn about evil in oneself, it'll come up. Since the seeds of any evil deed are principles that work for good and positive creation, if we misunderstand those principles or misapply those principles, we will see that. So it is a very difficult thing to always be looking at the good and to always be looking at the divine, but it's a lovely philosophy when it works. But unfortunately, we do not always work as intensely as we can, and this philosophy has misapplications also. Sometimes it's one of the manifestations of selfishness to be ostrich-like and to not see evil or the suffering or the consequences of evil because it would disturb the pleasantness of our own life. And it's part of resistance that we don't want to face what is difficult in us. And so one of the consequences of this philosophy is repression and outright ignorance. Sometimes it results in that very shallow misestimation of the evil that is in us. Just as we sometimes in our pride and competitiveness fail to properly respect the divinity that is in other people, we sometimes also tend to misrespect the evil that is in ourselves and others. And as a consequence, we find, for example, in the New Aging movement, not respecting of evil and a very simple, shallow, oh, it doesn't exist, we can wish it away kind of attitude. So looking at evil or not looking at evil can have its difficulties also. Not unexpectedly, these two philosophies of too much light, of a false variety, or too much darkness are representations of the two poles of evil itself and of the personifications of the two poles of evil, which we're going to have to look at in ourselves. Because the real purpose of all of this is to understand mismanifestations in our own being and to live out the good better. We're going to find a lot of that. We're going to find a lot of seeing personifications of evil inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. I have to tell you, if you haven't already noticed it, that personally the speaker is biased towards the view of looking for the good and trying to always look to the divine and let the evil come up as it may. The ironic thing about all of this is that this is said in the middle of a class called Myths on the Origins of Evil. So obviously I have some sympathy with both points of view. De facto, I have an intellectual resonance with the former point of view. So what I'm having to say is that part of the difficulty in all of this is that I'm finding myself more and more all of the time having myself brought to what the Buddhists would call the middle way, that almost invisible, low resistance middle path that you just sort of make your way between everything. And I hate to say it, but I think I might be becoming the Eisenhower of mystical philosophy. A thoroughly middle of the road outlook about a lot of things. The reason for that is the reason for this is that from the very middle you can effect the greatest extremes. And I am very much a believer in the spiritual life as being the balance of extremes. Except the physical life is a matter of temperance. All right, so we have other difficulties, and these are more personal to me about the dilemma that I'm facing with this series of talks especially. In these talks, I always try to speak out as firmly as I can what I know or what I have learned along the way. But I try to do it without authority or without appearing as somebody different or better or anything like that. It could be just as well in the Gnostic spirit that anyone in class could stand up and say the same thing. What is most important is what is said and not who is saying it. I have always strived to be informal because that is the way of spiritual life. All form proceeds from the Spirit, but the Spirit itself is informal, and any attempt to try to formalize things of the Spirit results in horrendous things like religious power and what the priests have wielded. I've always tried to be clear and accurate and reliable. And usually I try to present thought that is mature and that has hung around long enough to prove itself. But I'm finding myself in a dilemma of time. And that is that so far most of what has been said has been old and very well thought out. Some of the things are new or new extensions of things from before. What has happened in recent months, I think it has something to do with 7 years of sexual abstinence. But what has happened in recent months is that all kinds of understandings are coming to me. And the problem is that I don't have decades to consolidate it. And sort of relative to this life, it's a philosophical now or never. And so I'm going to be including more and more information as we go along that is fresh and new, and a lot of it will not be thorough. And sometimes even major corollaries to the points that I'm making will not be presented, and you'll just have to develop them all yourself, because it's, if I'm lucky, I have 20 more years of doing this, and there's a lot. I know that already that I'm not going to be able to say all the things I want to say. I'm not going to be able to write all the things I want to write, and I'm not even going to be able to read or reread all of the things that I would like to do. So it's going to be very fast, and some of the things are going to be premature. And again, there's a terrible irony, because where we're going to, especially in the next talk, is that a lot of the mess that we are in is a consequence of premature birth. And so there's an irony. I hit all the time with irony. So if what I'm saying is, relative to the class, if things are vague and unclear, if there are questions, please bring them up. If I can't answer them immediately, or we can't transact and work something out on the fly in the class, eventually I'll try to come back and I'll try to note things and come back with things, so that if we can't be completely thorough, we can at least get to the things that are relevant to the people in the class. So now let's recapitulate where we are. This is one of those talks again that is all reintroductions. We are looking at myths at the origins of evil. And we're doing so to understand the problems of ethical, spiritual living of our own lives. The first myth we are looking at, and it's likely to take the entire year, is the story from the Garden of Eden in Genesis. Genesis 3, we'll reread it because I'm sure that you have not been reading it every day or every week. So that's the thing. If you don't do it on your own, it's like when I was a kid at this time of the year, the magic storybook would open when all of the kids would face the radio and say, "I have been good." And sometimes the magic storybook didn't do it. And being a contrary and doing everything opposite, and because all of you haven't said, "I have been good," the storybook must open and you have to put up with bad reading. It's chapter 3 of Genesis. We'll fly through it very quickly. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, May we eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden? But the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. Not even touch it. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall surely not die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And when they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden, and the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldst not eat? And the man said, The woman who thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. When I discovered sex as a child in grade school, it was the girl's fault. Oh, how to relive this stuff all over again and again and again. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Interesting statistical study. Are more women afraid of snakes than men? Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all of the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord make coats of skin and clothed them. Coats of skins and clothed them. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the fruit of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword, which turned every away to keep the way of the tree of life. All right. Recapitulating, we first set out to determine who everybody was in the story. First, we took a long time looking at who Adam and Eve were by looking at the first 2 chapters of Genesis. And we did a big study of the plural divine and the multiple universe. And we noted that there were 2 streams of evolution, one in chapter 1 and one in chapter 2. And that the story in chapter 1 was about the evolution of form, and in that the human form was the last created. The second evolution that we looked at was in chapter 2, which was primarily recapitulative, but in that the humans were created first and the animals and plants were created after them, so that the one evolution goes forward, one evolution seemingly goes backward. Then we took a long time looking at history from the viewpoint of the mysteries. We looked at it as though it were a myth, and we determined who the Lucifer spirits were. Because if you go into biblical research, you find out that the serpent is always associated with the Lucifers. I'm going to bring in some biblical research, or at least mention it from time to time as we go through this. And then finally, we culminated a sub-series theme that was going through it all, the understanding of reality by looking at space, looking at the mathematics of space. And in that, we looked at the tetrahedron, and we looked at who God was, that is Jehovah, that is the highest of the highest initiates of the angelic life wave, the same life wave that produced the Lucifers or fallen angels. And last time, we began a new sub-series theme, and that is a time sub-series. And that's going to occupy us for at least 4 talks, looking at the spiritual philosophy of times. And we looked at time more or less by looking at evolutionary biology. We looked at the class of amphibia and of reptiles and of aves, frogs, snakes, and birds. In that, we started looking at purely at time. And all that we're going to do for the rest of the night is talk about a spiritual philosophy of time as it relates to our consciousness as it is right now. Because it's exceedingly important. We've already developed 2 principles of time, and tonight we'll develop a 3rd one more thoroughly, and we'll put them all together with one more that we'll develop next time or the time after, and talk about it relative to evil and the consequences of evil especially. All right. We are right now, even with our limited waking consciousness, we know now. And this now that we live in is a moment within the potential of time. And that moment can be expanded to be the cosmic moment, the eternal moment. It corresponds to seeing all of space, at least all of space that is manifest in matter, or that is the womb of matter, and not just physical matter, but all of the spiritual worlds of matter, where the point is continuous. Doesn't make any difference what its size is. It's continuous. It's all space. It is unbroken space. So it's like a point. And the point can be real tiny or it can include everything. The eternal moment, like the point of space, the eternal moment contains all time within it, but at the same time, it's timeless. It's timeless because in the unity of it, there is nothing wherewith to compare it. And so it seems as though everything were eternally present. It's a state of spiritual oneness. All things are born in time, just like all things are born in universal space. When we looked at space, we said that the point, the universal point, the womb that is space that can be everything or anything, we said that we could divide it within itself, such that we could divide it that there were points, uniform points that had only position, and that they were contiguous one unto another, almost like mathematical space. In the same way, we can do it with time. Time, the universal moment, can be differentiated into incidents that only have precedence. That one instant is almost part of another, and the only thing is a precedence of one before or after another, depending on how you come at it. This is because within the absolute, the division of spiritual consciousness can only see within a potential. And that potential has to be divided correlatively or correlaterally as the consciousness of the one is divided. So time and space are two sides of the same thing. It's both easier in some ways and more difficult in other ways to understand the multidimensionality of time than it is to understand the multidimensionality of space. It becomes difficult to make four-dimensional geometric objects in our imagination. But within time, finding time within time within time, it's not as difficult of a thing to do. One can do it rather simply. Space, as you remember, is measured and understood extensively. How much, how big, how far. Time is, with its withinness, the quality of spirit is understood intensively. With spiritual things, it is always to a deeper degree. It's not a matter of how far away something it is, it's how deep one goes within. Space and matter, because we've been in this exile in matter so long that we almost don't know of the ways of the Spirit, are easier to understand, and they're more easily understood by the square. That is, if we have, in any number of dimensions, if we have rectilinear coordinates, we can locate ourselves in space. Even in taking a three-dimensional coordinate system, we've got to be careful. I might make a mark there, and Shared will be able to finish that theorem he's been working on for several years. Might get a eureka right in class here, more likely than from the class notes. The time and spirit are more easily understood by triangulation. However, a triangle is a geometric figure, and that is again spatial. And that doesn't work with us. So we have to understand time by moments or periods, or the change, the threefold change, past, present, and future. Matter, as we see it in its most finalized state, right before our eyes, has a quality of being static. Whereas the quality of spirit is very fluent, and it is alive. The tendency towards matter is towards deathliness. The tendency toward spirit is toward life. And as a consequence, we are always aware, when we are aware of time, even in the as we approach the eternal movement, of greater and greater change, more and more rapidly. So, time then can be differentiated into multiple dimensions of instance, of connected to each other. I don't know how to say it any other way. But in the same way that we can build figures out of points, we can also produce periods or larger moments of time out of the contiguous instance. No matter what, if we're dealing with particular points, or if we're dealing with like a large-scale moment, as we did last time, the whole evolution of reptiles, or the whole evolution of form through amphibians, through reptiles and into birds, we're always dealing with something that is changing. Last time we spoke of any instant in time, any moment, even if it was one that lived millions of years, as the reptiles did, and even though it may coincide in time with the amphibians that were before it and the birds that came after it, any moment of time can do that. We looked last time at an instant or as a moment as a turning point. That is, things go from one state to another state to another state, and each moment is valuable as part of a spiritual process that is ongoing, something that continues to develop, continues to go onward and upward, something that continues to get better. It improves, and there's always more consciousness. Now, it is exceedingly important, and probably more important, to not see a moment of time only or merely as a turning point. It is probably most important that we look at a moment of time for itself alone. That's where it's greatest importance. Even if, well, actually, each moment can, if we can live in it to full intensity, each moment can be brought to coincide with the eternal moment. Just as the space always permeates any matter or any object in matter that is there, each moment is permeated by the eternal moment. In fact, it's sometimes an illusion to get carried off too much with the stream of metamorphic time and in that to forget about the moment wherein it is evolving. And that's what we're going to talk about for tonight, is living in the moment. Each instant then can be expanded, just like the point can be expanded to the universal sphere or whatever the shape it is. Each moment can go to the eternal moment. It is the experience of mystics and even of our own consciousness that if we are really awake in the moment, that moment becomes very deep and it becomes very inclusive and it expands, so that if we know what's going on right now, we can see how it came here from the past exactly, and we can see where it is going. So that the deeper we live in the moment, the deeper we penetrate, the more the moment expands to understand or to take in the past and the present. Boy, this is really hard because well, let's just try to look at the moment and understand what we saw in physical space with the triangle, the principle of Trinity in unity and unity in Trinity, where we find it richly, very richly in time. When we experience ongoing life, when we experience waking life, we see that the flow of life is such that there is a seamless connection between the past, the present, and the future. It's like we can see, even without being able to be prophetic or anything like that, it's hard to tell when one instant ends and when the next one begins. It is a continuity. You can tell when you walk from one room to another, or you can tell if you're driving down the highway, you can see how rapidly forms are changing. But the more deeply you get into time, it's like spirit. It is not so separated. It's not so segregated. It is not so discrete as matter is. Spirit is continuous. And so, when we look in the moment or in the instance as one comes after another, it's easy to see that the transference from past to present to future, or from future to present to past, is like a very easy change of consciousness. It's just like what we spent all of last year talking about, the three Grace sisters who had one eye between them. If you anticipate something that's going to be in the future, it makes its way into the present, and then it's in the past. And it's just like the consciousness passes smoothly and evenly between them. Yes?
I think you understand.
Well, they're dropping like flies tonight. When things go from the state of having been potential in the future, or having come from consequences of the past, when they come into the present, the awakeness of consciousness and the awakeness of knowledge, self-knowledge, it is just like self, like God being awakened out of beingness and the will to be. That is out of anticipation or out of history, when something becomes now and we are awake in it now, in that is where in that is born selfhood. I don't know how to say it any other way. It is we know ourselves by being in the present. And all of the being of us and of the cosmos, remember when we were talking about Trinity before, we said that before there was a third, there was no God. There was spirit, and that spirit had attributes, but until there was a selfhood, there was no God. But once that selfhood was understood, then not only was the self born and the potentiality of many other selves, even the attributes of spirit came to know selfness or potential selfness through that self. And what we are saying is that when we live in the moment and when we awake relative to the flow of time, we are in self. It's, I don't know how to say it any other way. All of the whole of the entire creation, all of our spiritual being depends upon being born in the moment. And the quality of the moment is the quality of spiritual being. So it is of utmost importance not to live in the future, not to live in the past, because they are illusory. If you think about the future, it has a dreamlike quality. And even the things that happened earlier today or yesterday or 10 years ago also have an illusory, dreamlike quality. It is only what is awake right now that has reality imparted to it. What has happened in the past or what can happen in the future is all depends upon how we birth it right now. Remember we said, I think it was either last week or the meeting before, we said that the easiest way to become spiritually clairvoyant and to have divine states is to do everything that you do with complete self-consciousness. It's what Carlos Castaneda calls impeccability. It's what Gurdjieff calls, or Krishnamurti calls, paying attention. Gurdjieff calls it self-remembering. It's all the same thing. It is when you put yourself totally in the moment, you are born, God is born, and everything that is going on is given its flavor from that. However, we have to be very careful that we don't personalize the moment that puts a glare on it or a sheen on it that is not what is, not the reality of it. We can't, we even bounce off of our own selves. However, because our consciousness and our spiritual power of will and how much we love is very frail, and because we are mere humans, our attention in an instant or in any moment dies. Our moments have beginnings and they have ends. But even so, living intensely in the moment does give value to the whole ongoing process. Yes?
You were talking before about the development of a sense of self.
Yeah.
Wondering how that compares to the development of sense of self for an infant.
You're anticipating. You're living in the moment. The sense of self is not there yet in the child, but the innocence and the unpretension is. The best example, and I'm very grateful to Richard Isle for this, the best example is spinach. Cooked spinach. And even though a child doesn't have full self-consciousness, in its non-pretension, it lives in the moment of eating cooked spinach. It knows when it has to eat that cooked spinach, it knows that it's gavi. And it knows every string that is in it, and it knows that intense, cloying taste of spinach. You watch a kid eating spinach. I can remember the picture. Boy, I almost wanted to gag at one time for having to eat spinach. And, and it wasn't just an attitude. It was, you were really living in eating spinach. You know what I'm trying to say? It's something like that. And the formation of selfhood from a child state is passing from living in the moment to becoming more and more aware of that moment relative to the ones that come before and after. But unfortunately, there is some kind of claimance, there is some kind of personalization that takes place, and egoism does adhere to it. When we live in the moment, it is a spiritual experience. And like everything spiritual, it is wondrous and it is magical. I don't know how to say it any other way. It's wondrous and magical in that the flow of time goes both ways. The logic of the past, the knowledge of the past, of history, flows into the present. I couldn't be anything other than what I am from the choices I made in life. When you know that, you can see that there's a magical flow, that somehow the past comes and it flows right through the present and addresses the future. But simultaneously, living in the moment is so magical because at the same time, the future goes right through the moment into the past. So that the consciousness of time, there are two streams wherein our selfhood is developed all the time out of two streams of consciousness, one of potential, one out of knowledge. And we are then born of two streams. This is known by a lot of people. One of my favorites is Faulkner's Indians, who say tomorrow is just another name for today. Yeo, yeo. Like, why should we do it now? Because tomorrow is just another name for what's going on right now. Last time, we talked a little bit about how Steiner says that living in the moment, especially living in the moment of prayer, the concerns of the future and the imminent consequences from the past meet. And at the same time, there is a flow of faith and hope for the future and a wisdom and a reason that flow from the past. Of course, that isn't how we said it last week. That isn't how Steiner said it, but we're different people and it's a different time. So we can take temporal liberty with it all. When we talked about that, we went into a little divertimento, and we said that a leap approach to time was not wise, such that if we leapt back to a consequential moment in our life and always proceeded forward from that moment, we didn't learn anymore, and all we did was grind that moment into us more and more deeply, and we became more and more blinded by being stuck in that moment. We also said that to try to leap in the future as though we were a prophet and then flow back with the time was to build fantasy bridges. And that both of them turned out to be unhealthy. The attitude with addressing the flow of time with regarding the present in relation to the past and the future is that in both cases we swim upstream, and we do so self-consciously. We'll come back to that. Spiritual teachers say that at the end of the day, when we're retiring, is the time that we volitionally look back. And as we look back from consequence to cause to cause to cause, that act unscrews us, because the forward act the forward consciousness always grinds us into things. That's why destiny or history is as it is because it proceeds forward. And if we look forward at night when we're going to sleep, we won't leave our body properly. If we think about what we're going to do in the morning, we're ensuring that we're going to be attached to the world and that we're going to have dreams. We're not going to get away from the body cleanly. But if we look back at the end of the day, we look back, we objectively see ourselves, we lift ourselves out of the form, and we're more capable of working in the spiritual worlds. We're more capable of seeing the totality of an experience, because we've seen it from cause to consequence during the day, and in the review we see it from consequence to cause, and then we have the totality of time objectified by seeing both streams, and we see the whole event. In a similar way, the spiritual teachers say that immediately on waking in the morning is when we should go forward. We draw on the deepest flow of spiritual consciousness. We're really clear when we wake in the morning. Our bodies are clean. They're unobstructed by the past, either in physical gunk or psychological cling. And that is the time that we can incarnate the Spirit and come into the flow of time as it meets the future cleanly. So that it's a recognized way to address time very deliberately. Yes?
How much easier would it be to do what you just said in, say, a natural environment as opposed to a man-made environment?
It seems to be difficult no matter where you do it. Because in both cases, what you're doing something that doesn't come naturally. Spiritual things are unnatural. Natural things come instinctively and nature takes over. But if you want to be someone who is part of the creative agency, you have to be free from nature. And to be free is very, very difficult. Any time that you start with the present and try to go into the past, or any time that you start with the present and try to build into the future, accepting novelty, it is a very hard thing to do. I can't say that most of the instances where I've tried to do it in nature have been like camping out and things like that, and I'm usually so tired at the end of the day, and the richer air and such like that, I conk out really easily. All right.
As far as the waking up part.
As far as the waking up part, I do think that there is built into our body what are called circadian rhythms, which are 24-hour rhythms. And I do believe that if we really are in touch with ourselves, that we do rise with the sun and we do set with the sun. In times when I've been perfectly harmonious with my being, I have waked up exactly as the sun rose where I was at, even though there was no difference in light, like it was in a dark room or something like that. I think we do harmonize with the whole of nature. Okay. Oh, boy. One of the things when talking about spiritual experiences is that we have to be careful of illusion. We know that even in regard to the material world, we know, and we can have it proved to us again and again, that there are things like optical illusions that we can't doubt. Psychologically, as we turn inward more in the direction of the Spirit, there are also illusions. So we have to be very careful about illusions. However, because we are so habituated to material things, and in our egoism that developed at the same time as our concretion into matter, we become assuming, and we assume we know things. And this assumption is an illusion, and we think that the material world is reality. And one of the consequences is that when we start having spiritual experiences, we tend to think that all of them are illusion. So we have to be careful to test everything. But nonetheless, it's not some other time, and it's not some other place. This is it. We don't have another life. This is the life right here. This is, our spiritual consciousness. It can't be anything other than what we are right now. And it can't be any place else. We can't say if I were someplace else I would be more spiritual or something like this. This is it, right here, right now. All right, so there are illusions. But some of them are not illusions. And one of them is with regard to time. Because the continuity of spirit is so seamless relative to the separate and disparate ways of matter, it seems to our consciousness to be an illusion that the flow of time is an illusion. It is not an illusion. It is a reality. And the reality of experiencing the flow of time is really important, and how we do that is extremely important. It seems that almost all spiritual works that I have encountered anyway, everyone seems to agree that we live in the now, but that relative to the future and relative to the past, we swim upstream. Because it's only when we swim upstream that we're free. As long as we're carried along by a flow of time, we're not free people. And I want to look into that a little bit because it happens around us, and it can happen to us very, very easily. We've looked at leaping backward and coming forward, but we saw that ground things in. It doesn't take much, like for example, if you're in a conversation with people, if you really address the moment and the logic of what is happening by flowing toward it, you get the sense very clearly of where things are going from the past. We've all been in those conversations or arguments or whatever where you can say, uh-oh, I see where this is going, and I don't like where it's going. If we address it squarely and meet it and see where it's going, when we have that kind of recognition of being in the moment, then we have the ability to change. It doesn't have to be an out-and-out, knock-down, drag-out affair where people are, the consequences where people are carrying, they get, you get on an argument or you get on a line of thought, and if you're swept away by it, it becomes an extremist thing. And some of the forces that work through time are antagonistic to each other. And if you become part of the antagonism, you are then some kind of instrument of the forces that are working through time, and you're not a free person. Extremely important issue. Even a little bit of self-consciousness is important. If we don't exercise self-consciousness relative to the past, we become people of destiny. We become historical figures. It seems really nice. We're swimming along on the spirit of the times, but we're not in control because we have allowed destiny to take us over. We're not free people. It's not a pleasant situation to be. Pity the person who not only flows along with the times or with history, but actually revels in it and actually intentionally tries to go flow in it. There are a number of cases, the common example that is always taken is Napoleon. Tremendous decadence and downfall because instead of identifying self in the moment and in that identification being free and knowing what's coming down, how this develops from this, he just allowed himself to be carried away. And then you fall into decadence, and you eventually see that you're being put to sleep. And when that stream of history has played itself out, it's just something like a mindless fad. So a person of destiny may seem popular or powerful, but they do not have individual freedom. Socrates said, relative to such people, why should I be afraid of a tyrant like that? That's not somebody that has any power. They're not even in control of themselves. How can they have any power with regard to a greater reality? If we flow with the stream, we become flaccid. We don't have will. We don't have integrity. We don't have courage of our self-conscious conviction. And that's what causes things to go, to bring us down. In a similar fashion, it is wise to swim upstream relative to the future. We must accept and not deny novelty. We must say that it is there, because if we don't accept it, we start turning back with the flow of the future. And what happens to such people? They become curmudgeonly reactionaries. Or, we're seeing a lot of it now, the people who are unwilling to accept the changes coming from the future, fundamentalists. In short, if we don't face the future and then swim upstream into it, we become fossils. Yes?
So it's a slow developing talk. We've reached the point where we can talk about the flow of the future to present to past.
Okay.
You just give an idea, that's what it sounds like. And before you had said, relative to the present, the past and the future are illusory.
Seem illusory.
So what is it that's coming to the present from the future?
Well, we're coming to that. This is a very slowly developing talk. Well, the only trouble is I didn't have, from here on in the notes get more and more terrible. I put in hours and hours and hours to develop the talk, and it got to the end, and I knew how far I had to go for it to be a complete development, but I had to race.
Well, I'm finding every step of it is very absorbing except for that one point.
Okay. All right. All right. It should. I think you should be at least a little bit satisfied. Okay. All right. It'll come out. So, if we merely try to extend the past into the future and don't accept novelty, there's a great deal of knowledge, there's a great deal of rationality that we get from watching the past causes. If we merely try to extend that out, we become rationalists. And rationalists are famous. Scientists, for example, who know the whole history of science, are famous for not being futuristic. There are, like when relativity came along, there was loads and loads and loads of information. But nobody could make the step into relativity thinking because they were thinking so much from the past. They became rationalists. There was not an acceptance of novelty, sort of a willing to see something new coming. So there are, relative to the future, 4 A's. You have to accept it, and you have to anticipate it, because that's what happens when you live in the moment. You anticipate what is coming out of the flow from both directions. And since it is something that hasn't been yet, and in some ways it is not created or completely create in its nature, it is something more theoretical, and it's something that one aspires to. You can't accept the future unless you love it, unless you aspire to it. What drives you forward into the future is an aspiration. And finally, action. Yes?
Now, some people, when trying to do that, might have something along the lines of doubt. How would you trust your instincts, so to speak, when doing that?
Somehow, if you recognize that in yourself, you have to forego doubt. That this is what happens when one enters truly into the moment. When you're into the moment, you take the leaps of faith.
There's a word beginning with A that you could add as a fifth word?
Not that I know of. There are special things that have happened in your life that will relate to a talk that will be 2 talks from after this one. When we deal with the consequences. And as I was plotting things out into the future, I said, that's one that Jim is going to be interested in.
This is where we begin with A.
All right. If we don't aspire, and if we don't act, and if we don't have faith in the flow that comes from the future, that is, if we are weak in our will, it will overflow us. That's what happens with fundamentalists and rationalists. They're living on the past. They keep living the same causes over again and again. So what happens if we don't have the will? Normally our life is like this with regard to the future. We plod along. Something happens, something happens, something happens, and then something completely new comes, and it asks us to be something more of ourselves, and sometimes we're not prepared. So what do? We hesitate and we dawdle. Bad move. It's like a tsunami comes on you. And this is, it's not just, some people are just mild nostalgiacs. They don't want to continue to grow up as life goes on. So they take nostalgia for an earlier period in their life when they were young and pretty and had all of that energy and such like that. But it can be really serious. The whole phenomenon of what all psychologists call retrogression, or regression, when you regress back into infantile states, or even a cosmic nostalgia, where the golden age is in the past, like all that's coming in the future is downhill. This is not an acceptance of the future. It's like believing that God was good in the past, but God is not going to be good in the future, and that everything is downhill. And if you've ever seen regression take place in someone where they become almost like infantile in their attitudes, you can see, and you can see that at any time that you try to accept even the present, to say nothing of looking forward to the future and the kinds of consequences that might be coming on in the future, boy, do you meet resistance. But it's not willful resistance. It's the same thing that got him into that trouble. It's a very clever, sly, like a little fish. It deflects. It doesn't want to swim upstream. Yeah, I know trout swim upstream because they know where the good stuff is coming down.
Sometimes it's fear.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're not living right now, if you're not in the spirit of right now, that'll happen. Okay. What we're doing here is we're looking at really simplistic fundamentals. For all of the relationships to time and to space, there are psychological conditions. And that if you look at any personality, and if you look at any psychological condition, you can relate to it perfectly by time and space. We have an expert in here on Qigong that could tell us how, if I moved over this way, the talk would be more interesting. And if I moved way over this way, it It would be even more interesting. Okay. It's a really interesting thing. I would very much love to. This is those things that happen. You'd really like to, when you start understanding these things, you'd like to develop about 8 or 10 different lines and be able to at least show that this corridor goes on. It's like the first time I ever went to a cave, and they showed all of the areas that weren't open yet, and you could see that there were all those beautiful things this way and that way and that way. Unfortunately, we don't have time, and I may not ever have time to develop them, so all of you are going to have to feed it all back to me from what you do. All right. So we've been simple-minded, and we've been simplistic. And we've been so simplistic that we could even think that the flows of time into the moment are symmetric. They are not. There is a very, very different quality from the past to the future. The streams, even though the moment can be expanded in both directions and we can see more of both, the streams are different, and they are radically different. Time is not symmetric. It has to be unsymmetric, or there would never be anything new. There would never be any freedom. All it would be a passage of something that was already predetermined, and it would just be we pass from fad to fad to fad, and there would be no facts to determine novelty. We would have no creativity. Even our self-consciousness would be meaningless. It would be already predetermined. The present and the self-realization, remember, we're equating experience of the present, experience of the now, with self-realization. That is a realization that changes all things. It changes them irrevocably. That you cannot change the past. When you know something, these things happen. You stumble across the fact, maybe it was that your spouse cheated on you or something like that. You can't say it didn't happen. That's another kind of psychology. When something happens, it changes things. If you had never heard music before, and then suddenly you heard music, you couldn't go back and say the world doesn't have music in and it isn't a beautiful place because of it. When something comes self-consciously into the moment, it is changed. What takes place in the moment is it changes things from the dream. Remember, we said a long time ago that the creation is God's dream, and we are part of it. We're collectively, creatively part of it, and we're projecting into the unknown that dream. And when we interact with the unknown, the experience of that becomes known, and the consciousness of the divine, of the Spirit, grows. And this is an eternal process that goes on. And it is the self-conscious knowing that changes something from the unknown to the known. Something is changed from a dream state or from an unreal state through to a reality state, and everything is different then. So living in the moment finalizes things. In fact, you can live in the moment in a very, this is what Zen Buddhism is. It's like that famous cartoon, the young monk and the old monk facing the wall. It's the monk's first day, and the old monk says to him, "This is it. There's nothing more." That's carrying maybe not the healthiest attitude toward it, but when you're in the moment, you're in the moment. Okay, this has all kinds of other ramifications, which I again didn't have hours and hours to expand on, or this talk would be about 16 hours. And so now let's for a moment look at swimming upstream and swimming downstream in what is in faddish popular terminology called time travel. Oh, we've become space age. We're going to do is time travel. There are people who do, great seers, who it is clear from what they can report to us, who in their inner consciousness do expand the moment, and they do see the future and the past. And they have focus on dimensions and directions in the moment, both within and without, that are currently to us inaccessible. Put in the modern jargon, they get into the moment so much that their consciousness is speeding so fast it goes beyond the speed of physical light. The experience of that is sometimes called reading in the Akashic records. I don't like that term because the way it is used nowadays is not what it was meant to mean in the first place. It's sort of another one of those garbage can terms that, like channeling, that has come to mean anything and everything you want it to. The people that are clearly of this higher state of consciousness report interesting things. One of the most interesting things that they report is that when they get into this multidimensional consciousness and they get into going faster than what we would call the normal progress of time, which for us is related only to the etheric physical world, where, that's only the only time we measure right now. We can get into the others, and when we do, it is like so many things are going on, and there are so many dimensions, and there are things within things within things, and there is so much going on that most people are reluctant to say anything about the experience because it is so vast that it is hard to say anything. It's just so much. One of the things that they report that is curious, that when their consciousness is in the ethers, which is the next level deeper in the moment, they report that remembering the past and remembering the future are very symmetric. That on the etheric level, the things that are coming into being in action are pretty much predetermined, because the creative activity that has been carried pretty far. Yes, you can heal things and you can change something, but you can't change it all, because like many, many beings of vast power are involved in the stream of the future that's flowing into the present. So it is very difficult sometimes, and very often people who are in the fringes of the moment beyond our current understanding have difficulty remembering. They don't know whether they're remembering something that has already happened or something that is going to happen. Yes?
Can you distinguish between what those seers were saying is symmetric and what before you said?
Yeah, that's what we're coming to. I'm terribly slow, and from here on it is very, very, very difficult. So at any rate, one of the things is that one, in some ways, remembers the future as much as remembering the past. Another thing is, now progressing much deeper in both directions, is that after a certain degree of penetration into the moment, so that you go quite far into the past and quite far into the future, and it's all present to you as now, the further you go in either direction, the less that is there. So that you can follow back pictures, and you can follow what happened in history, and, almost like archaeology, what happened in this spot. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You can follow it all back, but when you get far enough back, there's nothing there. Because what has happened is from many people remembering it backwards, all of the meaning of the forms has been extracted. And as it is extracted and is present in its essential form in the spirit, the form disintegrates because it's the meaning that holds the form together. If a spiritual being is in a body, a deeply spiritual being is in a body, and they pull out, that body disintegrates really quickly because all of the meaning that has been taken out of it. It's a really great cosmic efficiency. That there's, it's recycling in the most perfect way. As long as there is one little bit of something that has not been extracted from a form, that form lingers. But once everything has gotten out of it, the form goes back to the macrocosmic realm from which it was made, and the essence of it then resides in the spiritual consciousness as a kind of soulful wisdom. When one proceeds the other direction in time, very far into the future, things are thin there because it hasn't all been created yet. The great big score, the general idea of the creation is there, but there's a lot of room for improvisation. And the way that it's going to play out is not clear yet. What the main posts are of our future are known, that we're going to reach such and such a consciousness, but how we're going to get there, that's not there yet. So that this is a really hopeful notion. It means that what we're doing now, especially what we're doing now really deeply, extends way into the future, and there's hope that we can create it and that we really can have our dreams come true. Because remember, aspiration is one of the qualities of swimming upstream into the future. If we aspire to an ideal and do our best to live toward that ideal, that allows us to participate in the creation as things become more dense and come into the reality. Okay. Oh, we're almost done. Eventually, when things become so thin, one has to transcend and go to a deeper level or a deeper realm, a more antecedent level of creativity, which, because it is closer to the creative source, is more permanent, is more powerful. And all of the meaning of it, like there are things when you get beyond the etheric memories and you get in deeper, like into the memories of the creative thoughts, there things go back millions and millions of years. So that the more the moment really does expand and you see the thoughts and the pre-thoughts, there is like a logic when you're working with an idea and you're doing some creation. You can see, well, I can do it this way, I can do it this way, and I can do it this way. And you're coaxing thoughts out of an idea into existence. And you can see how that is being done in the cosmos with regard to the future. And you can see how the thoughts, like of evolving animal classes, like we saw in the last talk, how one class succeeds another class, succeeds another class, and you can see how there is a logical 90 minutes, but I didn't expect to get this close either. So it was a trivial. How funny all this. All right. Eventually, one exceeds even thought. And then one transcends all manifest creation whatsoever, and one then lives in the ideas. one can follow the reasons behind history all the way back to see the idea that it came from. And one can follow the future, see what's just about to happen, and what the intention is behind that, and what the intention is behind that, and that automatically brings you back to the same ideas. So that in spirit, when you transcend anything manifest, you come to the ideas, and those ideas are brighter or less bright, depending on what has been known as a result of them, because the knowledge eventually is reduced and the soul essence is brought back to them and it is assimilated. It's a very important spiritual term. Assimilation is not the same thing as absorption. Assimilation is like when we eat food and digest it, it gets absorbed, but the sugar is assimilated to the brain because that's what the brain needs. The fatty acids are assimilated to the heart because that is what the heart needs. Assimilation means taken to a like state. And since everything is a result of the ideas, including the idea of Godhood itself, the past and the future meet in the ideas. So the illusion that we had when we began is that time is really linear. There's a flow coming this way and a flow coming that way. But ultimately, when we follow deeply within the moment, we find what we knew all along, and that is that time is cyclical. That is that there is a cycle, that there is an origin. There's no better name for spirit, especially individuated spirit, than to say the origin of all things. And from that origin, there's a constant cycle of coming into existence and then the experiences meeting it and going the other direction. So there is it's a wheel that spins both directions. And even the background of the wheel is constantly spinning or constantly revolving, because the background of history and evolution, it's, where we have to look at this is all analogous. Our little moments from our little points of view are analogous to the moment that belongs to the Supreme. So there are little cycles from a fraction of a second all the way to millions of years to the grand cycle that we're talking about now, and that's even small relative to bigger cycles. And, so there are flows going both ways on the circle, and the whole circle itself is turning. And this is one of the paradoxes of it. In the moment when things are changed irrevocably from the future to the past, the idea changes from being a creative idea of how things could be to an enlightened idea of how things are. The Spirit is, I am that I am. And so there is a waking at both extremes of the circle. When one lives in the moment, so that the circle again collapses into a point or into a moment. And so that living in the now changes us both in our present waking physical consciousness and in our divine spiritual consciousness at the same time. We live in a parallel kind of existence. But there is something in this, in that it is like a perpetual spontaneous combustion. So that it is not just linear, it is not just cyclical. Because of the constant dream and because of the constant change, it is a spiral, because there is indeed progress. So there are all four types of time. There's momental time, there is linear time, there is cyclical time, and there is a spiral time, so that the light is always getting greater. Now, the interesting thing is that the more one lives in the moment, the more one reaches an eternal peace, at the same time that more things are spinning and spinning within, so that there is a paradoxical polarization of consciousness, so that one is timeless and changeless, but yet everything is changing on many levels. There's all kinds of spinning going on. You've had it all happen in your dreams and meditations, where the temptation is you want to go off and follow one of these little swirls. But if you can just stay and hold your consciousness in the center, you see that it's all spinning. And then comes the big one. And the big one is that when you enter into the moment, and you do so freely, when you swim upstream either way, or when you center and set everything spinning, it is your volitional action that participates in the turning of the wheel. That is to say that our living right here and right now is, in a very little way, but a very real way and a very important way, our living in the moment is making it all happen. Once we become free people and can focus into the moment, we are literally, every time we do that, whether we're living our life every day or whether we take a special time to pray or meditate, every time we enter into the moment, we are improving the quality of the cosmos, and we are indeed turning the wheel. Next time we'll talk about the moment when we began to open up to the possibility of that self-conscious participation. Yes?
Well, you said working with my intuition for experience time. Like if you listen intently to the lecture presentation and you're really absorbed, like tonight I'm noticing that the flow of time, the experience time, is a lot different.
Yes.
It seems like the concentration that's being put forth is like you're coming closer to the ideas, and your idea of the eternity permeating the motion of time is it's found in that experience. Like you're contemplating these ideas, and you're pulling yourself out of this flow of time and reaching back.
But you're really in it more at the same time. That's what's so beautiful. It's so beautiful and paradoxical at the same time. This is a testament to my ex-wife, but she used to talk about, she developed the kind of clairvoyance, I don't know if it stays with her to this day or not, but from her LSD days, she developed times when she would go into clairvoyant experiences, and she was more space-oriented than time-oriented, and she called it the fat skinny, because she was both huge and very small at the same time. And what you're talking about is it's very fast and very slow at the same time. Yes, I like it. That's it.
That's really being in the moment. You really got that concentration.
Yes, provided you don't do only one and not the other. Because there's always the tendency to polarize. That's what the two poles of evil are. There are people that want to stay blissed out in timelessness and say that this is all illusion, and there are people that say this is the only thing that's real and the other is illusion. But if you are totally in the moment, you are aware of all. And that's where those beautiful poetic statements come, that you're aware of the great power of life. And how does it say it? That not even a sparrow falls without the knowing of it. It's both are present at the same time.
It's like Jiddu Krishnamurti's paying attention idea. The one that seems to talk about meditation and how important that is. Yet his writings have, grace and eloquence in them, and bring in the world of nature. You experience both worlds.
Yes.
And, I just find it so exhilarating to find it there.
I'm sure Ed is going to stand up and give us the rest of the talk.
No, the afterword.
The afterword. Thank you very much. It was a hard talk, and